Welcome back to another episode of Geekorama, the podcast by geeks for geeks. We are sponsored by superherofiction.com, the one-stop shop for all your superhero novel needs. We are your hosts, Jeremy Flagg, and this week, it's Mr. Trish Heinrich guest hosting. For this week's episode of Geekorama, Mr. Trish Heinrich and Jeremy are talking about the comic book and movie adaptations of the X-Men's junior team, the New Mutants. Mr. Jeremy Flagg, how are you doing today?
You are officially our first guest on this show.
I feel powerful. Thank you for having me.
I really think it's just because Trish wanted a day off of me. So
Trish never wants a day off from you. Plus, this means she's out in the main room having to supervise the girls through their education needs right now, their remote pandemic education needs. So she's doing me a favor by letting me sit in the chair and have a geeky conversation with you, our geeky friend. So,
I think you're winning in this deal right now.
Yeah, I think so too.
Well, so everything is going to go just the same. So why don't we jump right into the poll list? And what are you reading right now?
I just finished up rereading some early 2010s runs on Mockingbird. Mockingbird is a heroine who was mostly in the 80s, and she was tied up with Hawkeye. I think there was a Hawkeye limited series where she was introduced, they fell in love, and got married in a 6-issue miniseries. She became part of the West Coast Avengers team, and she went through all of the turmoil that women heroes went through in the 80s, including being trapped in time, drugged, assaulted. She let her assaulter die by not saving him, and had her husband get all over her case about letting the guy die. So of course that led to a split and a divorce, and then they got back together, and then she's immediately killed. The
poor Avengers women.
they just brutalize them. The good thing, one of the only good things coming out of the Secret Invasion Skrull storyline in the late aughts is that they brought Mockingbird back. So they set it up that the real Mockingbird was taken by the Skrulls right after the separation. So the Skrull who came back and died, or the Mockingbird who came back and died, was a Skrull. So as part of the Secret Invasion, the true Mockingbird comes back. So they did a couple of interesting stories with her. One was Hawkeye and Mockingbird, where they're trying to see if they can make a go of it as a couple in real life, and as a part of a team. She set up a counterterrorism agency. Mockingbird is a former scientist turned spy turned superhero, so she's got all the skills. So yeah, she's running her own counterterrorism agency. That series is Hawkeye and Mockingbird from 2010, and it's okay, but it's very Hawkeye centric, and it really plays into the Mockingbird was the one who was in the wrong back when all that happened. It is interesting that they have to struggle with the fact that the Mockingbird who came back was a Skrull, and that the real Mockingbird hadn't decided to come back. So there's that little bit of tension, but it's very much Hawkeye kind of starting to go to the dark side because he's working this counterterrorism with Mockingbird, and is Mockingbird going to drag him down and herself with him? And so there's some interesting things there, and it's nice to see the character back in the game. But it's a series I would you do out of 5 capes, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I would give it a 3 out of 5 capes.
Okay.
Maybe even a 2+, just because it's in comparison to the next one, which was 2016's Mockingbird, which was intended as an ongoing series. Unfortunately, they canceled it after 8 issues. This comic is fantastic. It's written by Chelsea Kane and drawn by Kate Nijic. I believe that's how it's pronounced. And it is very much Mockingbird in her own element. It's niche. It's pushing boundaries. Issues 1 through 4 are a bit of a puzzle box that can be read in any order, and then it's all brought together in issue 5. and it comes together beautifully, and it's bizarre. There's Hellfire Club sex initiations. There's saving the Queen's corgis. There's ex-boyfriends and ex-husbands, and there's Shield medical insurance issues, and not Blue Shield, Shield, the spy organization. And it's great. She's a great character. The right bit of self-aware, deprecating humor with, no, I'm pretty actually kick-ass. And it does tie together a lot of the issues around the assault and her ex-husband. At this point, Clint Barton is on trial for killing the Hulk as part of the Civil War II storyline. So she's peripherally involved in that. It's just a brilliant run. I give it 4 out of 5 capes, and the only reason I'm taking a cape off is because Marvel was idiots and canceled it after 8 issues. It was never going to be a huge appealer, but you feel like mega corporations, honestly, I feel like they should put out these niche products, and even though they're going to lose a little bit of money on them, and this is one that I think it could have found a stride and just been a cult classic. So Mockingbird, 2016, only 8 issues, but they're well worth your time.
And you would think that if they have the market research going into this, like go into it knowing that Mockingbird is going to be a 12-issue run, and here's your full storyline.
Yeah. Doing that would have been fine if they but they really pulled from what I remember at the time, and I don't recall all the details, but they really pulled the rug out from under the creators. It was supposed to be an ongoing issue, and they had planned to cancel it after the first 3 or 4 issues. So she was going into this thinking, hey, I got all this room, and no, you got to wrap it up now.
It's the same thing with Netflix.
Yeah.
Here's a beautifully crafted first season, canceled.
Right.
No one is going to take a risk on these smaller characters because Marvel's going to be like, oh, it didn't sell 50,000 issues, so cancel.
Right. And really, it's these smaller characters where you get to do much more interesting things. You can still have your mega crossovers and all of that, and have these characters on the periphery and the side. Alas and alack.
Well, I decided to do a limited series as well, since we're going to talk New Mutants. For all my love of Ilyana Rasputin, I had never actually read her real origin story. I didn't realize it was a separate 4-issue run. And so I decided, let's check this out. It's called Magic, 1983. So you have to put on your 80s hat for this. It was written by Chris Claremont and drawn by John Buscema, who will do a major push throughout New Mutants. But
yeah,
the entire storyline is basically it takes an event that happened in X-Men, and in one, I think it was 1 or 2 issues, the X-Men go to Limbo, they face Belasco, they manage to escape with the help of an alternate reality storm, and they get Ilyana and bring her back. So this 4-issue run happens within the seconds that take place of the X-Men leaving. And because time runs really differently in Limbo, they managed to create 7 years of plot in this fraction of a second.
Right.
Oh my God, it's boring.
Oh no.
I wanted to love it because, it's Magic and she's got to be one of the most badass New Mutants that there are out there. But she's a whiny 7-year-old girl, and she's in this extremely adult situation. And I love Kitty Pryde because Kitty Pryde acts as your proxy, and as a young kid, she was you. But Ilyana is too young, so she can't be the proxy, and you're basically left watching this 7-year-old become a badass as her soul is corrupt. Like, it's way too adult for what's happening. They should have just kind of cut right to the end.
Yeah.
The nifty part is there's Storm. Storm is in it. Kitty Pryde is in it. Colossus and Nightcrawler all have roles in it, except they're the alternate reality version where Illyana got out and they stayed. So Storm's a magic user, and Kitty Pryde has become cat, and she's part cat now because Belasco's kind of cruel. And it is a really complicated story that leads to this really questionable good guy, except I could have probably read a novel with the amount of text that's on page.
Yeah.
And on top of that, and this is a Chris Claremont issue, I love his stories, but his writing when he was in charge of dialogue, if someone is swinging a sword in the panel, you don't have to say, I'm going to swing my sword at you.
Yeah. Or he'll often have a paragraph of exposition within that swing. It's like, you don't have time to explain the history of your soul sword.
Yeah.
The full totality of my matches.
and because it's through a 7-year-old's eye at the beginning, there's like a whole thing about her running back to her bed and hiding under the covers. I don't need to read it. I saw that she did it.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that it fits into this piece of history, something I didn't know ahead of time. I only knew it through like flashbacks and whatnot. But I'm going to have to give it 2 out of 5 capes because the concept is there. It had a lot of potential. It sets up some great stories down the road, but this whole thing gets summarized when Illyana shows up in the her first appearance in New Mutants. Yeah. And she's like, oh yeah, I'm from hell. I was 7. I'm 14 now. I'm part demon. I have a sword. Oh, by the way, I'm a mutant. And that's really all you need to know. Let's move on. So,
well, given Chris Claremont in his heyday of the mutant run in the early 80s, 2 out of 5 capes, that's saying something.
I always go back to a scene in X-Men when they were in Australia and Rogue and Storm are doing the dishes, and Storm gives a good solid paragraph explanation about how she's making a rain cloud over the sink so she can wash dishes.
Yeah. Oh, it was a serious weakness of his.
And he masterful storylines. I love his stories.
And his characters. His characterizations, and like it is interesting that you struggled with that Illyana characterization because Kitty Pryde, when she came into the X-Men, it really was a gateway for many people, including girls of that age who were not catered to in mainstream comics at that time. But she came across as this authentic teenage girl in this crazy adult mutant superhero world. It was a very impressive characterization. With Kitty Pryde. So it's interesting that he swung and missed so hard with Illyana just a couple years later.
I think had he started the story on like issue 3 when she's 14 and a demon and she's dealing with her good versus bad and being a mutant versus a magician. Like I found that to be way more interesting. It was almost the backstory went too far back.
Right. All right.
So
good.
If you want more recommendations, you can always go check out superherofiction.com, read our editorial reviews, go pick up one of the 400 plus books about superheroes, which is basically, it's what we do.
It is. And you do it well.
So what are you geeking out about? I'm actually kind of excited about this.
Okay. I am geeking out on a WandaVision adjacent project. That I would love to have happen. No spoilers for WandaVision, first of all. If you haven't finished the series, it's very well worth your time. One of the more satisfying wrap-ups from the Marvel universe that I can think of. I really, there are quibbles, there are issues, but I really like what they did. They brought in a character as a supporting character, Agent Jimmy Woo, who you saw in Ant-Man versus Wasp. I've never been a big fan of the 2 Ant-Man movies. They're fine. There's some funny stuff, and they're okay. I'm an Edgar Wright fanboy, and so him getting kicked off of it, I was like, I want to see Edgar Wright's Ant-Man. So I've always held that against the movies. But in Ant-Man versus Wasp, I hated what they did with Agent Jimmy Woo, who is admittedly a minor character in Marvel Comics, but he's a very cool character, and they made him a joke, just an ineffective punchline. And it really got under my skin. The Jimmy Woo we got in WandaVision is he's still more of an everyman than the comics version, but he's much more competent. He's actually good at his job. He knows what he's doing. He's got a strong moral center. It's great. I really enjoyed it. It's like if we had this version in Ant-Man versus Wasp, I would have been much happier with that movie. And in part, this is because in the mid-aughts, when everything is grim and dark, it's, the aughts in comics, the post 9/11 stuff, they just went all across the board. They just went dark. So this is Civil War. This is Cap has just been killed. Norman Osborn is taking over everything. It's in the reign of dark. And they put out a fun comic, Agents of Atlas. And it's Special Agent Jimmy Woo, formerly of the FBI and formerly of S.H.I.E.L.D., who's had a near-death experience, and a team he ran back in the 50s reunites to rejuvenate him. And they are the Agents of Atlas. There's an immortal gorilla man. There is a sentient robot who barely talks. There is a boy who was raised on Uranus and has special powers and a flying saucer. There is a mythical siren who thinks she's the goddess Venus and can convert anybody with her song. And it is fantastic. It is so much fun. It's just adventure and a great pulp-oriented crazy fun. Really look up the Agents of Atlas comics. They are well worth your time. So what I would totally geek out about, I would not stop oh-my-godding if they used Jimmy Woo and Darcy post WandaVision and created an Agents of Atlas type TV show. So people have been asking for an X-Files version of them exploring various weird events in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Great, do that. And as they do that, they assemble the Gorilla Man and M11 the robot and Namora and Venus and Bob, who's the human boy from Uranus. You assemble the Agents of Atlas. Call them. I don't care. In the comics, it's all tied up with Genghis Khan Empire, Secret Empire, Underground, and blah, blah, blah. You don't need all of that, although it's fun in the comics. You can have Atlas stand for, you come up with some kind of acronym for location and securing of alternate terror, something, I don't know. But bring back Agents of Atlas, do it as this X-Files show, have it with Darcy and Woo, and leading these superhero types, but not really. It'll be a ton of fun. It'll be crazy. People will eat it up. Please do this. I geek out at the thought of it. So in reality, I would probably have an exploding head. So
after all the petitions went around for an X-Files of Woo and Darcy, if Marvel doesn't see this as a potential thing, I think they're missing out. Because let's be honest, if you go back to Thor 1, it was a fun movie. I really only rewatched it because I like Darcy. I didn't care about anyone else. Yeah. Thor 2, the only saving grace was Darcy.
Yeah, tough movie, Thor 2. She's a great character, and I like what they did with her in WandaVision, how they moved her past the one-liner to bring in the bit of tension release. Here, she had agency, she had intelligence, she was figuring the things out, not just, what, meow meow? There's a problem with meow meow? She still had great funny lines, but she was integral into our team of heroes in WandaVision figuring out what was going on. So absolutely, bring that Darcy in.
I really loved there was a really emotional scene with her that I thought, because in the show, I mean, Kat Dennings always plays kind of a dumb humor person. And in this, she was smart. She had agency. And then there was one particular scene where they dialed in her emotional IQ, and I was like, you just gave me the full character I have been dying for since Thor 1.
Yeah. And if you did that with these two non-powered regular people running a team of misfit, superpowered beings, I think you're going to get a great dynamic and a lot of byplay and interaction. That's just, it won't be like anything we've had before. And yeah, I think Disney needs to be creating much more content for Disney Plus. Quite honestly, I think they need to ramp that up. So use these ideas.
Dennings in Dollface?
No.
It's only one season. I'm sure it's been canceled because it was weird. I mean, really weird. But Two Broke Girls, I carved out time every time it came out to watch that because I loved her so much. And Dollface is all Kat Dennings, and it's her level of weird, and she is just hilarious. She could just read directions off the macaroni box, and I'd dial.
What service is how can you find Dollface?
I think it's on Netflix.
Okay, I'll check it out.
It's definitely. It makes me wonder if Kat Dennings can't act and she just reads a script and goes, "That's a Kat Dennings role. I'm in." Because she plays herself, or I hope that's her. I want it to be her.
The fact that it feels that authentic is a sign of a good actor. So, what are you geeking about? Geeking out about, even?
So, yesterday I was going to watch one of the lowest rated sci-fi movies of all time on Netflix. And as I was looking for it, I stumbled upon something that I was like, let's take a chance. I watch so much sci-fi that I am now like going back to 80s and filling in missing gaps.
Okay.
So, new on Netflix, and it's being released as a weekly, is called Siphius the Myth.
Okay.
I believe I was watching it late at night, so I might have this wrong. I think it's called Symposium on Netflix, but it is a Korean sci-fi show.
Okay.
And the opening of it starts in kind of some sort of dystopian future, and people are going through a line to go into a portal, and you really don't have any clue what's happening, except this girl's father says, "Do not contact this guy." Okay, well, I know the first thing you're going to do is go find him. So later on, we see her running through a train station, and she's being chased by people with Geiger counters and assault men, and you're like, I like a good mysterious beginning, but I was so baffled by what was happening. But the actress that plays the warrior, the elite warrior is how they label her, she did a really good job acting with no lines. So even though it's in Korean and it's not dubbed, which meant I had to pay attention, and then all of a sudden it switches to this guy who he is super charismatic. He's one of Forbes' top 10. He started this company we don't know much about, and he's on a plane, and the plane's about to crash. And so he winds up fixing, like, going into the plane and ripping out parts and fixing the one thing that's keeping the gear from coming down. And it kind of starts a landslide of stuff, like, what was it that struck the plane? Everyone's calling it a bird, but he gets footage and says otherwise. And somehow this ties into his brother's death from 10 years ago, but is his brother dead? Like, it's just enough of this time back and forth sci-fi-ness that I was like, I kind of need to know. Oh, and this girl is like super badass and basically superhero jumps her way all over the place. And I was like, I don't get it. And I'm interested now because I feel that American sci-fi, about 15 minutes in, you know how it's going to end. And you're basically just there for the eye candy at that point. It's a Korean drama. There are long emotional interludes with American, like Celine Dion style music playing in the background. It's not quite a true Korean drama because there's still plot happening, but it gets kind of close. And I realized at 3 a.m. I probably should go to bed, yet I still have 2 more episodes until I'm caught up, and I kind of need to know what's happening. So the characters are lovable. They're charismatic and they're intriguing. And there's this control bureau who's chasing them, but we don't quite know why yet. And I wish it was a binge series because it would be done today, but I'm gonna have to wait for like a month to figure out what happens. But if you're a fan of non-traditional stories, if you're a fan of smaller casts that are very character driven, Korean cinema is awesome. And if you by chance liked the show Continuum that was on Sci-Fi, I think like 10 years ago, it's very Korean Continuum right now.
Oh, okay.
Boy genius, girl fighter from the future, gotta save time.
Right.
Maybe that's the plot. I'm not entirely sure yet.
Yeah. That's interesting. Those things are very tricky to find the balance of. We're going to tease out the mystery in a way that's engaging, as opposed to, okay, I just don't care anymore because you're giving me your breadcrumbs. So it's always fun to find a show that hits that balance, that finds that stride.
And at about midway or 75% through the first episode, I was like, maybe I'm not going to watch the rest of this because I see what they're doing, and she's going to go back and try and save time. And then it ends on a cliffhanger that I didn't realize.
You didn't see it coming.
Yeah, this is way more important than I thought it was. Now I need to know why. Yeah. So
cool.
Yeah, definitely. If you're running low on new content, it's a new show coming out of Korea. It's called Siphius the Myth, but it's also, I think it's called Symposium on Netflix for America.
All right. Sounds good.
All right. We are going to take a short commercial break, and when we get back, we are going to do a deep dive into New Mutants.
Behind every great superhero story is a sleep-deprived author. Join Franklin Kendrick every Friday as he takes you behind the mask and asks today's hottest superhero authors the burning question we all want to know. Do they always write in spandex, or is that just a weekend thing?
All right, and we're back, and we are going to be talking about the wonderful world of New Mutants, which is comes out in, is it 81?
No. So New Mutants, as in its original form, was co-created by Chris Claremont and Bob McLeod, and they had a one-shot in 1982, and then launched the ongoing series in 1983. And because it's mutants, and because it's comics, and because it's the 80s, they have an incredibly convoluted storylines, including various spin-offs. After issue 100, they turn into X-Force, which is very different from New Mutants. New Mutants as a title is brought back a couple of times, and they do have a current New Mutants run now, which is
hilarious.
And I haven't read it yet. I'm not super wild about the Hickman, with a few exceptions. I'm not wild about the direction Hickman has taken the current thing.
His art direction has kept me entertained, but I will say the storyline, I feel like it's like watching TV, except you constantly keep changing the channel, and now you're trying to make a story out of it.
Yeah. As an aside, and we'll get back to New Mutants, Bob Hickman has great sci-fi concepts. he's not great at characterizations. So like a few years ago, he did an Avengers storyline called Infinity, which brought out these really odd, interesting potential universal concepts, but it could have been anybody. It was an Avengers story ostensibly, but I never felt like I was reading Avengers because the characters didn't come through. And I feel kind of similar with the current run of X-Men. It's intriguing storyline and interesting ideas behind there. Some of the titles have writers who are bringing in great characterizations. I think you mentioned Marauders last podcast. Totally agree. I'm loving Marauders. I'm loving what they're doing with Kate Pryde.
Love her.
Fantastic storyline. So there are writers within this current X-Men storyline that are doing interesting things. I'm just not wild about the overall direction. But in any case, New Mutants, starting in 1983 as an ongoing series with the characters Cannonball, Wolfsbane, Karma, Magic, or no, she wasn't in there, Sunspot, and what was Danny Moonstar's?
Mirage.
Mirage, that's right.
Because she's a telepath who shoots arrows at people.
Yeah. It is interesting. Chris, for all of Chris Claremont's faults, he was very ahead of the time on trying to bring in diverse characters. So with this, you've got Sunspot is Afro-Brazilian, Karma is Vietnamese, and Mirage is full-blood Cheyenne. And you also end up having 3 women to 2 men in the original lineup. So that is really cool. There are other times when he completely misses the mark, like when the character Magma joins the team, who's blonde hair, blue-eyed. We first meet her in Brownface, where she's hiding among an Amazonian tribe in full-on man. It's yikes! There are moments like that throughout the run. New Mutants came out. I mean, X-Men was the comic at the time. It was incredibly popular, so of course they're going to have a spin-off. And at that moment in time, the X-Men were off in space on an incredibly extended run. And Xavier thought they might be back on Earth, thought they might even be dead. So bringing together this new team, kids who need help, it's a natural offshoot of the X-Men storylines, and making it a younger team of teenagers like the original X-Men back in the 60s, and getting your youths. Hello, fellow youths. And speaking to them with the comics, it makes a lot of sense. The storylines were all over the place, and some were great and some were truly terrible. The Lost Roman City in the Brazilian jungle was interesting. The introduction of Warlock as a character was absolutely fascinating and mind-blowing. So there's a mix of good and bad with this stuff. But one thing Claremont has always done well is characterizations. And the characters were great. And the way they started to interact as teenagers and struggling with each other and struggling with abilities they don't understand, and this weird Professor X trying to suddenly boss them around, and all of that kind of tension and conflict was really well done throughout Claremont's run on the series.
And Claremont did a really good job. If you look at each of the characters in the original, they're all broken to some degree, and some more than others. But Cannonball is coming from a poor farm. He's poor white trash. Mirage is coming.
His father died from black lung. So he had to give up all his dreams of college to be a coal miner at 16.
Mirage's entire tribe gets killed, and not entirely sure why at this point, but
her parents in particular,
Karma comes in from a war-torn background and has a sibling who there's some trauma going on between that storyline. Sunspot is this super rich kid who is like his whole future's been kind of written out for him, and he wants no part of it. And he, weirdly enough, you would think that's not really that big of a problem, but he doesn't know how to get out of it, and it actually leads into a bunch of plots later.
Yeah, and also the fact that he's an Afro-Brazilian, he faces that same prejudice that African Americans would face within. I mean, I think you open up, he's kicking ass in a soccer game, and he gets taken down hard. Refs don't call it, and the other kids taunt him with racial slurs. So he's coming from, I'm privileged, but I'm also deeply prejudiced against. So there's that fun, not fun, sorry, but interesting.
Wolfsbane was the one that always kind of stuck out to me because of the original 5, she has her entire back plot is just trauma after trauma after trauma.
Right.
She's a devout Catholic, and she is repeatedly assaulted by a priest, and
raised in an orphanage.
And her mutant powers kind of make her the demon, and it was a really I remember reading some issues when I was younger, and the storylines were so much heavier. Meanwhile, X-Men are out with the Starjammers trying to defeat an alien race trying to destroy the world.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
Rain Wolfsbane, she as many abuse victims do, buy into the framework that her abuser provided to her, this fundamentalist Catholicism. And at the same time that she rejects him and recognizes there were bad things about there, she still clings to that foundation and struggles with her own abilities. I mean, she shifts into wolf form. She is literally a werewolf, so that she must be evil and the powers must be evil. So she has that constant. I mean, it takes over a decade before she really comes to in real time, before she comes to accept that stuff. So yeah, there's plenty of wounded people here, which I think really it plays into the strength of the X-Men. And I know the common line, well, the well-accepted line is the X-Men were a comment on civil rights. And I see that, but I think that misses the full mark. I think when the X-Men and the mutants, and particularly the New Mutants, work well, it's because they're a commentary on adolescence, on these moments where your body betrays you and you have no idea what's about to happen. You can't control your abilities. And you think absolutely everybody sees you as a freak, not recognizing they're all going through their own freak moments as well. And yet you believe deep down you're special. If people could see the real you, they would see how special you are. But it's so awkward and you can't control anything and you're fumbling and flailing and, oh my God, what just happened? And I think that really is where the mutant analogy shines.
I really remember Cannonball early on. He's this super tall, lanky dude, and he's poked fun at for being this super tall, lanky dude.
Yeah.
He's that kid in middle school who had a growth spurt, comes back from the summer and is like 2 feet taller. Right. And it gets brought up repeatedly. And then you fast forward to the beginning of X-Force when, who is it? Liefeld?
Rob Liefeld.
Everyone has biceps bigger than their head. And Cannonball shows up and he's this ripped, toned teenager, and you're like, oh, that's the other end of puberty here. Okay. Yeah. You're missing the whole point of why this existed in the first.
Right. Well, it was the 90s. Things had to be extreme.
And this lineup only lasts for a very short time because more so than I think even the X-Men, Chris Claremont did kind of treat them as disposable. And Karma, her ability is to possess people. Well, we already have Mirage as a telepath, so she kind of becomes a little redundant, and boom, dead.
Yeah. Although he does plant the seeds. Xavier's like, I don't think she's really dead. But she is off screen for well over a year in real time before being brought back as part of a plot. And she's been kidnapped the whole time and such forth. They add Magma very early on within the first 5 or 6 issues. And Magic comes in pretty quickly as well, within the first year, I think.
And what I really liked about this is X-Men has always been a little more sci-fi and a little less fantasy. There's space travels, there's aliens, there's giant robots. I mean, it's written more science fiction than anything else. And New Mutants, when it very first started, didn't quite have a genre. And I think with the introduction of magic, we start to see, oh, well, if literally this person named Magic, well, let's make more mystical plot lines. And so New Mutants kind of traveled down a magic road and kind of embraced their fantasy roots.
Yeah. Even when a character like Warlock, who's a techno-organic alien, comes in, the way he's drawn and his abilities, it does feel more, maybe not magical, but very much out there, as opposed to like the Starjammers that you were talking about. Hey, space pirates, good guys, awesome.
I really like New Mutants because I feel that once Warlock got introduced, they thought, how are we going to draw this and make it interesting? And at this time, they were just like, it's New Mutants. Who cares? Do whatever you want. Did you just give me free reign? Okay, we're going to make this weird.
Yeah.
And this is, I think, where New Mutants starts to take a firm genre hold. And they're like, okay, if we're going to go fantasy, let's go dark fantasy. Let's dance on fantasy horror.
Yeah.
And for me, once they introduce that element, I'm here for your weird plots.
Yeah. Well, and it helps that well, they toyed with this early on because the first couple of issues, Mirage is getting completely gaslit by Professor Xavier, who's possessed by a spawning alien queen, and is worried that Mirage is going to uncover it before time is right. So Mirage is seeing things and having stuff done to her that nobody believes. So there is this horror element right at the beginning. But you're right, with the Demon Bear storyline, and which coincidentally is our first introduction to Warlock, although his storyline doesn't really start, but the seed is planted. It really takes off, and that in the vast majority part is because they bring in Bill Sienkiewicz and turn him loose as an artist. It was unlike anything on a mainstream comic before, and it is absolutely mind-blowing. Find that run of comics and you will still get blown away by what he was doing. As I'm rereading those issues for this, it is just his artwork. It's hard to describe because there is a core realism to it at the same time that he is expanding his lines and things aren't fully defined, where things are bleeding out into each other. And yet at the core of it, you see under that is this realistic art style. It was only a few years ago, I discovered his earlier work on Moon Knight. And it's a very real, it was a very realistic style. It was very much the post Neil Adams 70s kind of Jim Aparo sort of style. And I mean, it's fine. It's good. But over the run, and it was edited by Denny O'Neil, who really started to help. And when Denny O'Neil passed a year or two ago, Bill Sienkiewicz came out and said he absolutely opened my eyes and encouraged me as an artist to start changing things. And you can start to see some of those elements open up in the end of his run on Moon Knight. But it's still, what he did in the New Mutants run was unlike anything I'd ever seen before. And he went on to go even farther, like with the Elektra miniseries that he did with Frank Miller, which took it even to an nth degree, which was great because you weren't sure about her sanity through that run in the comic. You weren't supposed to be, so his artwork absolutely held to that. But with that
worked out perfectly, because with the introduction of Legion, who is one of my favorite characters, you have this dude who has unlimited power. We're not quite sure what's going on, and steadily as we've been leading up to this, the artwork has become, I'm going to say, more chaotic and more
chaotic is a good way. Yeah.
And with the introduction of Legion, you have a character who has unlimited personalities. It's inside his head. They go inside his head for part of the plot. He's dealing with these evil personalities. He's a scared infant sometimes. He's basically Jack the Ripper at others. And this fractured art style, for me, is the perfect visualization of a character.
Absolutely.
You don't need to read it. You can look at it.
Right.
And that was, for me, that was New Mutants' heyday for me, because that was
absolutely
art met high concept, met this,
and yet still grounded in characters, in believable characters that you really gave a damn about. You wanted to see these kids get through this. It was terrifying in part because it's like, how the hell do they, the Demon Bear Legion, how the hell do they overcome this? Magus, and I just realized that you're talking about magic stuff. Warlock, although he's a techno-organic alien, his name is Warlock and his father is Magus. So they really are leaning into their fantasy genre while throwing a sci-fi concept at it.
And it even got really dark. So arguably the most hated character in all of comic books, or at least in the X-Men universe, is Cypher. Doug Ramsey. No one likes him. His ability is to read language. Oh, yeah. The only person who gets hated more than him is his name called No Man? He was one of the original X-Men, but he made everyone forget that he exists.
I don't know that.
Oh,
he
God.
made me forget he exists. I haven't read that storyline.
It's so bad.
Okay.
And so he gets killed off because he's kind of useless. And the writers were arguing all the time, let's kill him off. All he does is hide behind trees during fights. And so they kill him off. And his best friend is this techno-organic thing who this plants a seed for a much bizarre and heavy-handed storyline down the road. But Warlock takes him out of the coffin and basically says, I can bring him back to life. And this is the most, like, can you imagine at an actual funeral someone being like, hey, here's the body. We can still make this work.
Yeah.
And New Mutants was not scared to be dark.
Yeah, absolutely. And it makes it very clear why Josh Barrow, when he pitched a New Mutants movie to Fox, pitched it as a horror movie. Its early iterations were definitely steeped in that, and it makes a ton of sense. As I'm this adolescence comparison that sticks in my head, it's very much horror. I don't know what is going to happen next. I feel unmoored, unbound, and the darkness that the Claremont Sienkiewicz run really brought into it. It makes total sense as a horror movie, especially if you're going to use Demon Bear, who is just a terrifying, you're not quite sure what, haunting, stalking mirage. And so
the movie, okay.
Are we going to announce spoilers for the movie?
Yeah, there's
we're going to spoil it all over the place.
So if this movie had been released at the appropriate time, instead of constantly being pushed back to the point where even the actors were making jokes, I think it would have been much better received. I think it had too much time for hype. The hype died. They tried to rehype it, and at this point, we were over it. And it was what I wanted. I mean, to be quite frank, I wanted a horror movie that embodied that bizarre comic book feel, and I had some issues with some of their choices, but for the most part, I got what I wanted.
That's interesting. I found myself deeply disappointed in it. I thought the characterizations were good. I thought they nailed a lot of the people. They didn't use Karma, did they? Right. So, but out of the original 5, they replaced Karma with magic. And the characterizations of those people, Danny Moonstar, she was interesting. Rain was great. Sunspot is really the only one who didn't get a whole lot of character work in the thing. But the actors were solid all the way around. I like that. But to me, there were two fundamental flaws with the movie. One is there's no threat. There's mood and there's creepiness, but there's no threat until really 2/3 of the way through the movie before you know, hey, this is the thing that's going to kill you.
And even then, if you had... So my big issue was, what's the villain of this story?
Right.
Because Cecilia Rise, one, they just picked someone out of a book that had
Right.
the word doctor in front of them. That kind of
Right.
irked me, because it could have been Sinister, just hands down.
Right.
And it would have been fine. But she is, or the institution that they're in, which, by the way, is just down the road from me.
Yeah.
That is the villain for 70% of the plot. Oh, by the way, there's a demon bear.
Right.
You didn't marry these things very well.
Right. You open with what we later learn is the demon bear destroying Danny's people and her barely surviving. But we don't get a lot of follow-up on that, including really a complete and utter lack of emotional response from Danny, whose father just died, and she's waking up in a hospital across the country, and she's like, what? There's not a whole lot that she's given to do in terms of processing that trauma.
And she just kind of, for that first stint of being in the asylum, for lack of a better word, she just exists. Like, she doesn't cry, she doesn't show bad attitude, she doesn't, like, there's one scene with her and the doctor where the doctor's like, oh yeah, by the way, they're all dead, sorry. And she's like, oh. Yeah. Okay.
And we don't even get a good sense of, oh, well, she's in shock. We don't get to see that or anything like that. And that is frustrating. And that combined with a lack of thread, it's like, okay, well, it's creepy. I'll give you that. But they even undercut the creepiness. If you know the comics, you know what's going on. But they make it incredibly clear if you don't know the comics, as these kids are having horrifying things happen to them within the asylum, we keep cutting to a security camera footage of Danny and showing how her mutant power is spiking whenever this is going on. So there's no, oh, okay, so it's her mutant power then. All right. There's no horror there. They take it away as soon as they start to show it.
And it would have, I think, been better if they had just started the movie 20 minutes in and she wakes up. She's there. We don't know why. We don't know that her whole tribe is dead. We don't know that Demon Bear exists because, oh my God, he explains it in the first minute how the movie's going to end.
Right.
But I think if you had just cut that out, it would have left mystery. And then the rest of it, we could have seen how that evolved. And then just suddenly there is not just the creepy of the fact they're locked in this building, but, oh, now there's a manifestation of their own issue. Mm-hmm. It just, I agree. Like, every time something scary happens, you're like, figment of imagination.
Yeah. How
real is it? Like, and they don't even say, like, the things that they're experiencing in their heads could kill them.
Right. Right. I mean, we see some after effects, but it's like cannonballs, the physical damage from cannonball blasting away from this vision. It's not until the very end of it that we get a sense of, oh, these things are actually now physical and are going to literally kill our heroes. I think, cutting in later absolutely would have helped. I think you needed to bring Mr. Sinister, who is honestly one of the scarier villains in the X-Men universe, and have him as this Freddy Krueger, play on the 80s horror stuff and give us a modern nod on Freddy Krueger, where he's invading each of these dreams, or he's spiking Danny to cause these events. But we see him when this stuff is going on, and you give him this horror look, the pale face, and this glowing red third eye gem thing and lose the cape. But you have that poking in and out, and then it becomes, who is this guy? He's clearly a threat. How is he going to hurt these teenagers? You put in a lot more. It really is too bad. It very much was the studio getting cold feet after seeing the full extent of the horror that Josh Barrow wanted to create. And I have no idea what his original script was. Maybe it was even worse than what we ended up getting. But it is... I'm always upset when an artist where their whole concept is just convoluted. Limits are great. Limits, you get the original Matrix. No limits, you get the second Matrix. Limits create art.
Analogy.
But to have your vision no, you don't get to do any of that, it becomes just a mess, which to me this was.
What's really aggravating is he pitched a true rated R, straight up psychological horror.
Yeah.
And originally the studio said yes.
Mm-hmm.
X-Men was failing all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
They needed something different, and he was offering it. And so he originally pitched a 3-movie contract. The first one was going to have Sinister in it, and it was going to build to the Inferno storyline.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how that would have actually worked. The Inferno storyline is so large and convoluted.
Yeah.
But if you had taken, part of my issue was Dr. Cecilia Rise in the comic books is kind of a reluctant hero turned useless for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
Her biggest storyline is drug addiction. And
did they give her a drug addiction?
Yeah, she got
that's it.
Superhero amped up power thing. And so in this, she is the bad guy, but she's a sympathetic bad guy. I don't want to like my bad guy. I either want them to be bad or have there be a mastermind forcing her hand.
Right.
Otherwise, I didn't really know. It was confusing. Was she helping them and trying to protect them, or was she really just, did she know she was doing bad things?
Yeah. It's
the throw away.
Absolutely. There was, and if you have Sinister in there, then you have the chance for the mastermind. Maybe we see her being haunted by visions of Sinister as well. But you're right. They needed to pick a lane, and they didn't. And it's fine to get us sympathetic to her and see her sympathy towards the kids early, as long as that's leading to the arc where, no, she's behind this and she's been manipulating you with her kindness. But we didn't get that. We got, she's kind of creepy and kind of sympathetic, and
she gave her C game.
Yeah.
The one thing I really did like about it, again, the characterizations, is the two characters who stood out for me. Cannonball, I really liked him in this, but he was completely overshadowed by Rain and Ileana. Ileana is a bitch. No explanation, no need for it. She's a bitch. And for comic goers, we instantly know somewhere on her, she has that sword and she's part devil, and we know why you're like this.
Yeah.
And they never felt the need to explain it.
What I like, they gave the images, like when we see the demon dimension when she's porting, and you do get enough of a hint there, I think, to say, oh, there's something more going on with her than just being a bitch. And so I agree, it was a great characterization, and I like how they hinted at that. There was a great use of not being too obvious. And
I had to admit, when she pulls out the hand puppet of Lockheed, I'm just a little kid clapping, and I thought that was all we were going to get, and that's all I needed. And then when she goes into the other dimension and the puppet's real, I was like, this has nothing to do with New Mutants, and it's my favorite part of the movie.
I was annoyed by Lockheed the puppet. I'm like, I like Lockheed as a character, and he's supposed to be with Kitty Pryde, and this is turn it into a puppet. It's like, and then we get the full on dragon later. Okay, no, I'm good. I'm really good. This is,
she was weird.
Yeah.
And then Rain, like again, she was one of the most traumatic characters in the comic book. And I was like, they're not going to go there with her. Oh, yeah, we're going to go there. All the other characters are just dealing with, typical horrors. No, her horror is the real thing. Like, she experienced this.
Right.
Like, why does this poor comic book character get beaten up so much?
Yeah. Yeah. It was done. And her relationship with Danny was very well done. Maisie Williams, of course, is great. Even a few years ago when she was younger. She's got top-notch skills, and I really liked the characters were the saving part. Trish enjoyed the movie. She was worried about she doesn't do horror. It really does affect her strongly, but she did great with this, and she was just loving the characters, and Ilyana in particular. When she goes full soul sword, demon sorceress, she was. But it's also a sign of it's not a horror movie. If Trish can make it through without a nightmare, it is not a horror movie. So pick a lane, please.
If you hop over from this show, and if you had, if you look at FX's Legion, granted, FX's Legion is like so cerebral and bizarre. It would be hard to join the two. But like, I felt like these characters were so well made that I really just want him to come back as Legion. So bring him into the next movie.
He was excellent. The Legion TV show. Excuse me. You get all the content here on Geekorama podcast, including sneezes. I only saw the first season of the Legion TV series. I did really enjoy it, but I just couldn't put up with more. But trying to put Bill Sienkiewicz's art into a TV show, I thought that show makes you feel as unmoored in the Bill Sienkiewicz's art of Legion. It was a very well done. And you're right; these characters could fit into a storyline there. That's how strong the characterizations were, which really was, to me, the only reason you watched the movie. I wouldn't recommend it personally. So I'm glad you enjoyed it more.
So in the hierarchy of X, this beats out Apocalypse. It beats out, anything beats out Apocalypse.
Yeah. Poor Oscar Isaac.
Yeah. It had so much potential. And it beats out both Dark Phoenix plots. For me, it even beats out. Did we have First Class 2, or was that Days of Future Past?
That was Days of Future Past.
Yeah, I hated First Class 2. It goes above that for me. Days of Future Past, it's better than the past part, not as good as the future part.
Okay.
But it's sad that I don't think this movie was wonderful. I enjoyed it. It ticked off my boxes. But again, like you said, I wouldn't recommend it. But for it to, for me, go so high goes to show that I've been watching movies with characters I love. And my love of the characters is dragging me through it. But they're bad movies.
Yeah. Well, it sure will be interesting to see where the X-Men, in terms of movies and shows, get taken. Now that Fox is done with it.
But this would have been such a cool if they crossed over with not the First Class plot. I just don't care about them. But with the original X-Men, the age would have worked out better. For an Inferno storyline and like Madeline Pryor and
no. You can't bring all that in. If they were going to do, if Barrow had his way and they did the 3-issue storyline, 3-movie storyline, the second one would have been Alien Invasion with Warlock and Magus. and the third Inferno, but you just have to keep that as a minimal thing. It's the demon realm using Ilyana to invade and supplant our realm. You can't bring in Madeline Pryor and all that. You just no.
The only person
That's
I
a
want
whole-
more than a good Jean Grey is a good Madeline Pryor.
No, oh God, that's a whole can of worms that we do not have time for today. But again, Chris Claremont, great writer. Madeline Pryor was one of those big misses. Oh, look, a year after Jean Grey dies, Scott meets her exact duplicate and falls in love. No.
It was weird. It was so weird.
Yeah.
That's why when she goes crazy and becomes Goblin Queen, I was like, she earned that.
Yeah, well, Cyclops' brother sleeping with her before they're actually divorced. That's issues. I have issues.
The whole storyline is just...
It's weird.
It is like reality TV weird.
Yeah. Well, right. Mr. Flagg, I appreciate you having this conversation with me today. Thank you for bringing me in.
Well, thank you for giving me more reason to talk about X-Men related things.
X-Men forever!
Okay, and if you are interested, go ahead and check out superherofiction.com. This has been brought to you by superherofiction.com. I'm Jeremy Flagg, and this is Mr. Trish Heinrich, also known as Dan Heinrich.
Sometimes.
And we will be back in 2 weeks.
With Trish back in her proper seat.
Maybe I'll find a guest next time.
All right. Can't be more handsome than you, though.
Aw.
All
right. Well,
thanks for having me.
Take care.
Bye, everyone.
To stay up to date with the Geekorama podcast, you can watch our videos on YouTube or subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts. And if you enjoy the show, leave us a review or hit the thumbs up button.